Hey guys. SimCity for the Super Nintendo is quite an interesting little city builder. I got it on Wii Virtual Console when I was 6 after asking for the new SimCity that came out, and in hindsight that was the right move. Even though most of the SimCity games were made by Maxis, who went on to then get murdered by EA, SimCity was actually developed by Nintendo themselves as a port of the PC version. And because Nintendo developed it in-house, Bowser's in it. And speaking of being murdered by EA, it's no longer on any of Nintendo's retro game services, and was even taken off a Virtual Console before the Wii shop was shut down. And the simulation for SimCity is broken. For one, rails and roads are basically the same thing, just one causes traffic jams and the other doesn't. Because of that, when you watch a speedrun of this game, pretty much everything's connected by train. And the seaport can spawn boats even if it's nowhere near any actual water. Also, you don't need fire departments at all, except for one because they ask for it, and even then you don't need to fund it because of how rare fires are. Oh, by the way, remember to demolish the schools and hospitals as soon as your townspeople build them, since in SimCity those buildings are worthless and don't do anything. And while the manual says demolishing a hospital may cause a disaster, and it actually does do that on PC, they didn't actually implement that in the SNES version. Oh, and the most well-known bug in SimCity is probably the integer underflow that gives you infinite money. You do this by spending all of your money and having a deficit at the end of the year, and then making your balance go negative by pausing and increasing your spending further, and then running the tax calculation after that, and the result? Money is set to very big number. Cool bug! There is also a second, very obvious, very annoying bug in this game, and it bothered me so much that I decided to decompile and reverse engineer the game to patch it somewhat. So the goal of SimCity is essentially to get to Megalopolis status, which is 500,000 people. When you do that, the track changes to something that had a lot of effort put into it relative to how often anyone actually hears it. To give you an idea on what getting to Megalopolis is like, I watched a guide by this guy named Adorable Andrew back when I was like 9 years old showing how to reach Megalopolis. When did I make my first Megalopolis? About 5 years later. And how many times have I actually done this in my life? 3. And how many times did I do it without the infinite money glitch? Just once. And this was all on easy mode, by the way. But anyway, this city is almost there, and... What the? Get out! I hate it when someone breaks into my apartment and unplugs my game console. But anyway, I saved the game so I can just load the file, and... Oh no. When you start the game up, the game forgets which buildings actually have power. Including the power plant. The nuclear power plant needs power, guys. Can we please hook the power plant up to a power plant to power the power plant? And yes, the simulation is in fact running assuming we don't have power. And as a result, the city has a major exodus due to a weeks-long blackout. And since the police stations aren't powered either, and therefore the police aren't doing anything, we also get a massive crime wave. This is a known bug, and I remember leaving my Wii on for days during my first Megalopolis attempts, since saving and loading the game would mean something like 20 minutes wasted just trying to get back to where the save file started. And when I play this using emulators nowadays, I just use save states. But still, it's annoying that that's here, so I decided I was going to try patching it out. The biggest hurdle, though, is that SimCity's source code hasn't really been studied a whole lot, which is probably why no one else has done this yet. So, step 1. How do we even get the code of SimCity for the Super Nintendo? Super Nintendo games were written in 6502 assembly, but not everything in the ROM is code. The game also has graphics and music. The data in SimCity is split into 16 banks of 32 kilobytes each, giving the entire ROM a total size of 512 kilobytes. For comparison, a plaintext copy of Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce is 1.5 megabytes, making it both larger and less comprehensible than the code for the SimCity ROM. To get the decompiled code, I used a tool called SNES to ASM, which assumes that everything in the ROM is an assembly instruction and converts it into ASM files, one for each bank of memory. Of course, some of this data isn't code and is therefore being shown as garbage assembly, in fact, most of its data, but we can just ignore those banks and look at the actual code. And that means that there are several banks in the code that are completely irrelevant. based on what I've seen from poking around at this with the help of Claude Opus, and by the way, I've barely scratched the surface of understanding what this game fully does. Most of the menus are in Bank 0, and most of the simulation itself is in Bank 3. The power bug happens when the game transfers the map data from SRAM, which, despite the name containing the type of memory that doesn't save, is memory that is saved, to WRAM, which is the working RAM that we are all familiar with when we say the term RAM, of which the SNES has 128 kilobytes. But, what are we doing? What's going on? What even is the SimCity power bug? Great question. The game stores the map in WRAM at this address. There, we can see each tile in the game is represented as a 2-byte number. When loading a city, we see that the most significant bit of each tile, these are little endian by the way, is 0. However, after a little bit of time, that bit is updated. Due to very high-tech experiments of connecting one power plant to one police station on an otherwise empty map, we see that, yes, the most significant bit in each tile represents whether or not that tile is powered. And since players who have large enough cities to warrant the power update taking a long time also probably know how the game's power system works, it would probably be better to default that bit to being on rather than being off. That's the rules. That's the goal now. So, now we need to make that change. But where do we put it? Bank 3 is full, and that's where the loading happens, but there is some empty space in Bank 0 that is currently just padding, so we can put our new routine there. Now we need to jump from the end of loading, which happens in Bank 3, all the way to our new code in Bank 0. This can be done with a standard jump to label, which would work if it didn't cause a bunch of new problems. The first major problem is that almost all jumps in the SimCity code jump to relative bits, probably as the result of an assembler removing labels at one point, or a programmer at Nintendo being a masochist. Either way, we need to change this in a way that doesn't disturb the byte alignment of everything around it. The hardest part of this was jumping to a custom subroutine and then proceeding on as normal after that subroutine. After a bunch of fiddling, I took an instruction out of Bank 3 and replaced it with long jump to my new subroutine. It's a long jump because we're going cross-bank. The old instruction now happens at the end of my custom subroutine, so we can't call it from anywhere else. Not that we'd really want to. At the beginning of the subroutine, we push all of the current values of the registers to the stack, and then we pop those back at the end, which make this as harmless as possible. After a while of fiddling with 10 lines of assembly code, and seeing everything from blank screen to game restarts in a glitched state, I got the game to jump to my new code in Bank 0, and then jump back and proceed as normal. I can tell that it went to my code at Bank 0 because I set a random 0 that I didn't think the game was using in RAM to 255. Hooray. And the actual patch now is surprisingly short. Just set the most significant bit of each tile to 1 after load. And now, there's no power bug. Now it's actually possible to play the game for 30 minutes at a time without your city dying. And now my city has finally hit Megalopolis status. Anyway, if you want to download the patch, a link to it is in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. A huge shout out to Ursel420 for being a channel member, alongside all of these wonderful channel members. If you want to support the channel, become a channel member today. I also have a buy me a coffee if you just want to send me something once. Anyway, thanks for watching, now go touch grass.